Hello, this is Piero Giorgio, author of Survive the Economic Collapse. Today, I have a special guest.
Sweet, 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 sweet.
Danny, I'd like you to meet my big friend, Sweet Johansson.
Tonight, I have with us the Golden One. Hello.
Hello.
I'm very happy to speak to you tonight.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Good to be on the show.
Excellent. I've been following your videos online for about 2 years. And I actually think that most of my followers here on YouTube don't necessarily know you. Can you perhaps tell them a little bit who you are and why are we talking tonight?
All right, yeah. So basically, I have my channel. You can search for it, The Golden One, and it revolves around a few different topics, mainly centered around the self-improvement, philosophy, some politics, and generally things that go along that path. So it's hard to explain a single theme. It's many themes, but yeah, I try to produce good content, try to present a good life philosophy, try to spread the word of enlightenment, and yeah, so that's the short introduction, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is your philosophy of life?
Well, basically, my philosophy of life is a traditional right-wing perspective that you constantly try to self-improve yourself as a man, constantly trying to get better, and obviously try to teach other people what you learn yourself. And then I had heard to ancient traditional ideals such as honor, loyalty, those sort of things. And I think in the modern world we live in right now, there are perhaps other virtues that has replaced the ancient traditional ones. So it's about trying to revive some of these classic traditional virtues as well.
Now, let's talk about these virtues, because obviously, being Swedish, you have a tradition, and you are part of a long history of fierce warriors, of course, but also very humanistic and very enlightened people. And you have both this tradition of great warriors, not just the Vikings, but even up to recent times. You know, the Carl Gustav and the Gustavus Adolphus, all these famous kings had big armies and conquered half of Russia and half of Germany, and so you have this tradition. And at the same time, Sweden has been on the forefront of socialism, of a social democratic approach, and trying to help the whole world. So, how are your values linked to that history?
I'd say that it's a fanaticism that is within Swedish people. I'd say European people, broadly speaking, but perhaps most so in Swedish people. So this fanaticism makes us want to be the best or the worst or the most extreme or the ones in the forefront. So back in the Viking Age, it was who could go on the most daring exploration raid out in the ocean. During Gustavus Adolphus and Carolus Rex, it was who could be the toughest and most aggressive warriors. And during the last century and also now, it's about who can be the most humanitarian, who can be the most kind and nice to other people. So it's that extreme mindset to want to be the most extreme all the time. So that could explain why we've always been good warriors, but at the same time very, very bad now. So yeah, the fanatic mindset is that's my analysis. Then obviously there's a lot of different components, but if there's something within the Swedish soul, I would say that makes us prone to these sort of extremes. It's that.
Okay, so when you talk about honor and loyalty, and I presume strength and mastery and these values,
yeah,
why are they so important to you?
I don't know. They just are. It's it's something that has been so important, like obviously not just in European and Swedish culture, but all over the world for men or indeed for women as well. Our civilization is founded upon, that you can rely upon each other, that everything isn't for sale, that there are virtues that are higher than money, and that there are certain things that are worse than death. So dishonor is worse than death, and glory is better than money, for example. If we adhere to these sort of virtues, we will have a better society. And in terms of friendship and the social circles, if I know that I have good friends, shield brothers, who I can trust, obviously if they have the same view on honor and loyalty, I know that I can trust them. I know that I can build a strong bond with them, and our tribe, then our social, our community will be a lot stronger if we're all on board with these traditional values. And what made us strong back in the day was because we honored these virtues. We placed high emphasis on them. So that's why I'm trying my best at least to reawaken parts of that today in the modern world, where a lot of these things have escaped.
Okay, I asked this question because obviously I'm a different generation than you. I'm 46, 47 soon, and in my generation, you don't have these values at all. It's about making money at any price, at any cost. I'm not saying I'm like that, but I'm just saying that this is the value of my generation. And it was about making business. And I must say that, and this is why I find it interesting that some young people like you, younger people than you, have this philosophy, because I tend to share these values with my close friends and my family: honor, hard work, trust, and loyalty. But I don't have many close friends and family. Maybe it's 10, 20 people. And in my generation, if you're not part of certainly for me, if you're not part of the close group, everything's open for business. You can, and this is probably why, my parents' generation has fucked up. The baby boomers, they have fucked up the world. And our generation, on one hand, we still have traditional values, but on the other hand, we've been taught to be bastards, to fuck up everyone if we can and make money.
Yeah.
And I see in the new generation, either people like you seem to have a lot of strength in these new values, or people who are complete wasted losers. So it's even worse than my generation. Some of the people from your generation. You see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the boomers have been in Sweden as well, completely wrecked the nation, completely wrecked all of the West. And I mean, a lot of people today are still a result of that. So my generation, I'm 28 years now, and I see a lot of people, the only thing that they are concerned with is temporary pleasure. So getting out, getting drunk 2 times or 3 times a week, having promiscuous sex, having not going forward. It's all about themselves. It's all about pleasure, and concepts such as honor and loyalty. It's quite foreign to them. So a lot of people still in my generation are quite lost in that regard. But I'd say that there are some of us, at least, that perhaps as a response of the boomer mentality, look upon the boomer mentality and say that is not particularly glorious at all. So then we want to kind of revolt against that. And generation identity, they talk a lot about this. That in France, for example, that the boomer generation, they had so much, they have such good wealth, and they just squandered it all without any thought about coming generations. So I think that there is a bit of hostility for the millennials, perhaps, towards the boomer generations because of that.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Now the question then is how can you, or your generation, or even older people like me, if young people listen to me, how can young people reach to these kind of values? Because no one is teaching them. Certainly not at school.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a hard question. So I mean, we have Hollywood on one side that's just pulling them into decadence and destructive behaviors, and then obviously we have people like you and me who, yeah, we can talk about it. That's the first step, just talking about it, because many people, they haven't even heard about the importance of loyalty. Perhaps if they've heard from school, from Hollywood, and perhaps even from their parents that the only thing, as you say, is to make business, to be a bastard to everyone and just think of yourself. So the first step is just to present another alternative. Say like, okay, you can also adhere to these principles, you can also go along the path of honor, you can also be a decent man. So I try to emphasize the fact that just talking about it is a first step, and then trying to implement that in your everyday life. So if someone is a disciple of mine, and I expect them then to uphold themselves with certain dignity and be honorable, etc. And then hopefully that will have a trickle effect onto, perhaps if someone adheres to my teachings, then he will have a few other guys that can take a good example out of him. So
yeah, interesting. Now, one of the aspects that is obviously striking in your videos, I noticed a few things that are really good. First of all, is that you say people to look good, to make the effort to look good. Why is that important? Because that, at least my generation, was still taught to, if you go to business, you put a tie, you dress well, and so on. Younger generation seems to be a bit sloppy and slacky on that. How do you teach them? How would you teach them to, and why is it important to look good?
Well, usually I go with a quote from Aristoteles, and I'm going to see if I can get this correct. The aim of art is not to represent the outward appearance of things, but rather their inward qualities. So basically, what it means is, if you have a good physique, it means that you have discipline, dedication, passion. If you have I can actually take an example, and I think I've taken this example in one of my videos at least. And this was when I was in the army for a mandatory year. Our officers said to us in the beginning, okay, now you're going to make the bed the best you can possibly make it, because when we're going out on an exercise now, and if there comes in an officer from another company, and they go through your rooms, they can judge you on one thing, that is how well your rooms are made, how well your beds are made. So you can be judged upon one thing, so make that look as good as possible. And then in the Swedish army we call it a Prussian, like when the bed is made Prussian, so it's like a Prussian standard. And that really stuck with me because it was so true. So when I present myself, and I know that if someone just glances upon me for 5 seconds, they will judge me upon how I look. So if I'm representative of my political values, my philosophical values, strength, honor, loyalty, they look upon me, they will judge my values upon how I present myself as well. So that is, that's that, because humans, it just, yeah, we judge each other upon how we look. And then also the outside is just a mirror of the soul. If I see someone who looks unkempt, I'm gonna assume that this is not a disciplined individual. Or if I see someone who's really fat, I'm gonna assume that it is not a healthy individual. So that's how I try to present the looking good. But it's basically not about being shallow or anything like that. It's about deeper qualities.
Now, to add on that, you seem to of course value the strength, because obviously you're doing a lot of fitness.
Yeah.
I don't know if you started with bodybuilding or and then moved to, I think you're doing Thai box, right?
Yeah, or MMA. So
okay.
Thai boxing has been that was my first love. So Thai boxing. So
I do that right now. And
right.
It's difficult for my age, but yeah, it's good. So this physical aspect is obviously something that And I agree. I was doing lots of sport when I was very young, and having great body requires discipline, as you said, and discipline requires commitment, and requires the every day you have to wake up, you have to do it, and because it's much easier to look at the TV and eating chips.
Yeah.
And how do you force yourself, and how would you advise young people to do that?
The way I force myself to do it right now is more or less that I know I have to set a good example to others. So if I say to myself, if I go to the gym now, there will be 1,000 other guys who also goes to the gym, then I will obviously do it. Because at the other side, if I say I'm gonna be lazy and I'm not gonna live up to my own teachings, then these other guys, they can't really take me seriously if I'm not setting a good example myself. So having that sense of reliability towards others, and this is also advice for younger guys. If you view yourself as part of something greater, as a cultural renaissance throughout all of the West, because that's what we need today. And if you view yourself as a part of that, it will be much, much easier, because then if you go to the gym, you know that other guys, perhaps 1,000 other Western guys who are feeling a bit insecure with themselves, they can draw strength from you. And at the same time, if you don't go to the gym, if you're not part of this cultural revival, you are sending the signal to other guys that it can be okay to not set the pace high. But then, speaking motivation, there's so much motivation to gain. Just looking back at European history, can look at some ancient Greek statues and just think to yourself, I want to look like this in a year's time. I'm going to strive towards this. And then also it's really motivating to constantly go forward to get stronger progressively every single day, just a bit stronger, and take joy from that.
Yeah, that's and obviously linked with the physical is the mental.
Yeah.
And usually, lots of people, myself included, when I go sometimes I don't feel like going to the gym. I don't feel like waking up and doing what I need to do, and yet you have to do it because I have kids that need to go to be ready to go to school, and then I only have maybe 50 more years to live. So every time I don't go to the gym, it's a wasted opportunity. So it requires to train the mind. And what's your trick to train your mind?
Well, basically, if you view it as a small progression, as a small victory every time you do something you don't want to do. So going to the gym, for example, that also becomes a mental victory. When you've done that enough times, the next time will be much easier. So that's why I say, like, in the beginning, everything is the hardest. Because once you've done it 50 times, the 51st time will be much, much easier than the first time, because you have conditioned your brain to not think about how hard it is, or if it's raining outside, or if it's cold, or if you're tired. So you condition your brain to not view the discomfort as a sign of that it's okay to not do it, basically. As you say, like the physical and the metaphysical, you train both.
Okay, you mentioned you've been in the army. Is it still mandatory in Sweden now?
No, so I was actually the second last year that it was mandatory. But when I say it was mandatory, it was kind of mandatory. They took out some guys from it, but officially it was mandatory. But they're talking about making it mandatory again, so we'll see. Perhaps the old system returns.
It will be a different army now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
If it's mandatory. Now, the question about the army is that, of course, in Switzerland we still do have like a sort of mandatory army, and it is a way to get, for a lot of young men, to get discipline, to learn suddenly to not be with mommy anymore, and also to learn some warrior skills. And in what way this was formative or useful for you?
The absolutely most, the largest benefit was just to get in to get away from the self-centered. I was quite individualistic beforehand, which everyone in my generation is. Like, you think about yourself, you just view yourself at the center of the universe, and then suddenly you have to take into consideration 49 other guys who also, and you have to take orders from your officers. But it's learning to cooperate, learning to submit to that hierarchy, and to recognize the fact that you have to work as a unit. You have to accommodate for everyone else as well. So it's not just a group of hyper individualists. It's a unit, like a fist that works together. That was the best lesson. And then obviously in regards to discipline and doing things that were hard physically and mentally, that was another aspect. So with discipline and everything like that, also very good lessons to be learned. But I'd say that the largest, for me personally at least, was that the individualist within me got beaten out of me. So I became better for it, I'd say.
Okay. Would you advise young people in Sweden or in Europe today to, well, in some cases it's not mandatory, so it's kind of semi-professional or professional. Would you advise them to at least try for a short, maybe 2-3 years, especially if they're a lot of young people don't know what they can do in their life?
Yeah, definitely. So I was in 11 months. That was the mandatory year we had. I did it because I wanted to do my service to my people, basically. And then in my father's generation, everyone did it. Like every single man did it, except if something was horrendously wrong with them, or if they were perhaps they were gay or something, then you didn't do it. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm a good Swedish man. I want to serve my people. And then also it gave me a year to going out to school and then going into the army. It gave me a year to meditate upon what I wanted to do afterwards. So that was a good time in that sense. And then, yes, I would definitely recommend young guys to join, unless it results in perhaps in the American case or the British case that they're getting shipped off to the Middle East to die in some bankers' wars. I wouldn't recommend that. But if it's just the training at native European soil, getting ready for whatever, that is absolutely recommended, I'd say.
I can see that you like to read books, obviously, from the shelves behind you.
Oh yeah.
And why is reading? Well, obviously, as a writer, as an author, for me, it's obvious, but it will be interesting to see what you can tell younger generation or older generation. Why do you feel reading is important in the context of what you teach them?
Well, basically, for me, I'm a native Swedish speaker, so I obviously need the best possible grasp of the English language. So the more I can teach myself of the English language, the better, because I want to reach as large possible audience. And obviously, the predicament Sweden is in, it's nothing unique. The struggle is throughout all of the West. So obviously, I want to reach everyone, basically. So that is one aspect, grasp of the language, and it's not just being able to speak, it's also about being able to write and everything like that. Second component, I have a lot of fantasy books and science fiction books, and that is to gain motivation. So talking about gym motivation again, or martial arts motivation, or motivation to just do things. I have so many epic, it's like watching movies, but you read books instead. So you have a lot of cool inspiration to just, okay, this is a cool character that I want to emulate. So a lot of gym sessions have been driven just purely out of motivation from these books, or for that matter, any epic films, etc. And then obviously a lot of these books are historic fiction as well. So I try to learn a bit about mainly British history, because the authors are usually British. So that's that. But yeah, I recommend reading to everyone. And another thing is that for the young people today, if they're on their phone all the time, just scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, scrolling all the time, the retention time that they can focus on something is so short. If you have a book, you force yourself to focus intently on something for a longer period of time. So that kind of trains your brain into being able to focus. So on the one hand, you have this really fast, impulsive 3 seconds clips and pictures, and on the other side you have a book where you have to, for a half an hour, just focus intently on that.
Yep. Now, I don't think you've read my books yet, or any of my books yet, so I will make sure you get some. But basically, my books talk about economic collapse, civilization collapse, and how you survive them. Have you ever thought about survivalism or surviving civilizations that die?
Yeah, in a certain context. What I have thought about, at least, is being more self-sufficient, and this is something I have in my life vision for the next few years, at least, to grow more of my own food, and then also get a hunter's license. And that's also because it feels a lot fresher to grow your own food, to get it like closer to straight from the earth to the plate. So it feels good that way. And then obviously the less dependent on others you are, the stronger you are yourself. And also speaking about these ancient virtues, self-reliability is one of them. So definitely, I think self-improvement, self-reliability, and a survivalist mindset goes quite well in hand. And then I'm also grown up in the countryside, in the forest, so I'm quite comfortable in nature already. So
good. Well, I think you will like my books then. To finish the first part of this talk today, perhaps what would if you were to talk to an audience today, if you have 100 people in a room, young men, young people, and maybe even young women, what would be the biggest advice and the most important advice you would tell them?
So the first step for young men was to stop watching porn. Absolutely first step. Because that is just bad in so many levels. It lowers your willpower in the brain, like on a chemical level. So that's the first step. Second step, go to the gym on a regular basis, or if you don't want to go to the gym, at least participate in some sort of sport, a martial art preferably, and then get out in nature a bit, explore. There's always a lot to explore, even if you don't think about it, because you're so accustomed to your own environment, so you don't really think that there's cool places, but there are. And then also read as much as possible. Read books, read on sources on the internet, and I mean YouTube. There's so much information, there's so much wisdom to partake in. So getting to a high level of knowledge today is so much easier than it was 50 years ago. So basically start a self-improvement journey. That would be my main advice.
Okay. Well, we'll move to the second part of the interview, and in the meantime, thank you very much.